right. Thanks everyone for being here. Carrie, would you be so kind as to do the roll call?
Go for it.
I can do the roll call. So Jerry Glazer.
Sure.
I am here.
Thank you. Alex Goodman.
Here.
Thank you, Alex. Dina Allen.
Here.
Thank you. Dr. Somane.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Kenna Lee has let us know she's going to be a bit late. Lisa Pierce.
I'm here.
Thank you, Lisa. Debbie Burns.
Here.
Thank you. Sonali Sikant is
Here.
Oh, that's who Andrea Livingston is. Okay.
Yeah.
I was wondering about that. All right. Woody Hastings is not able to make it today. Argus Brent, do not see Argus. Ambrosia Thompson, do not see Ambrosia. Everett Fernandez, I don't believe is attending these meetings anymore. Sarah Gurney.
I'm here for a while.
All right. And Diana Rich is not present.
Okay, I guess that's it for now. I think Kenna will be joining us in a little while. Hopefully everybody else has chimed in by another means if they choose to do so. Our next up would be review of action items. For anybody who didn't make it last time, we had our in-person meeting to get together our priorities for the work plan draft, and the major action item was for Phoebe to organize that into a work plan draft, as we said. So we'll be dealing with that shortly. Other than that, I think we're all set. Let's see, our next item would be comments from the public regarding items not on the agenda. Anybody care to throw in any general comments before we move on? Okay. Next would be any statements of conflict of interest with respect to any of today's meeting business. Not seeing anything. All right. Next up would be planning department report.
All right, and I'll go ahead and let Phoebe then John do any reporting that they have, and then I'll fill in with any other items.
All right. So I have two sort of updates, announcements. The first is, as you may have heard already, but this is my last meeting with Sebastopol Climate Action Committee. Tomorrow will be my last day, and I'm starting a new position next week with the town of Corte Madera. So I think I said this the first time I was leaving my Civic Spark position, but I just have been so inspired working with this committee and everything that you have accomplished. You know, even before you were a committee, getting this committee created is really amazing. So I know that you all will keep pushing forward and moving things forward. And I hope that the work plan that we'll be talking about today will be a useful tool to help you do that. So thank you all so much. It's been such an amazing honor and pleasure working with you all. And I'm not going too far. So if you ever need anything, feel free to reach out. And second update is was in your agenda packet, the RCPA Funding for Climate Change community kickoff meeting. So I'll put the link to that in the chat again. This is a meeting on December 14th. In the evening, there's in-person and Zoom options, and it's sort of kicking off their Funding for Climate. I'm not sure what to call it, but they're looking for people to get involved in figuring out what would be in an expenditure plan for a potential ballot measure on the 2024 ballot, looking at funding options, and the committees would be figuring out what that money would be going towards for the ballot measure. So it would be great to have some representation from Sebastopol on one of those committees if anyone's interested, and you can attend that meeting to learn more about it. Any questions on those updates? Yeah, Lisa?
I'm really sorry you're leaving us, Phoebe. You've been amazing, such a gift. And I'm just curious what your new position is in Corte Madera.
Oh, yeah. So the position I'll be starting there is their climate action and adaptation coordinator position.
Excellent. Congratulations.
Thank you. All right, John, do you have any updates for the planning department report?
City Ventures.
We did receive a official project application for the City Ventures project at the north end of town, which is behind the O'Reilly Center or building. It is for 80 housing units. That process is going to include a bunch of different entitlements and potential environmental review. So we'll be a little bit further along in the project line, but it is an official application, and we're going through the completeness review right now. And so look for that in the future.
Right, and that project, they have noted will be all electric. So, and they do all electric, and they do, I don't know how they structure it, but they have solar for all the homeowners as well. Joshua?
Yeah, are any of those units affordable now?
Yes, there is 15% of the units are affordable. I can't remember off the top of my head which income bracket it falls into, but it does meet our inclusionary housing requirements for that.
Right, and so it's 15% if they do it at moderate. If they do it's a lower percentage of units if they do a higher affordability, but the reality is actually, and so that'd be 12 units at 15%. So 12 of 80 units would be deed restricted. And the good thing about that is the other item that we have sort of right now at the planning department in full speed ahead is our housing element update. And the only category where we were potentially not, we potentially didn't have enough sites or units already in the pipeline was for the moderate income category. And so that obviously will help with that. So yeah, so that's that is one of the sites in our draft housing element as a potential development site. So and they submitted with the same number that we had and number of units we had anticipated in that. Diana and then Lisa?
Yeah, to your knowledge, do they still have within their plan the idea of corner senior units with exterior elevators? Are they still doing that?
Yeah, they have the option for the ground units being senior level or senior units, as well as ADUs, and then also the option for elevators. So
Interesting, thank you.
yeah, those are some of the options that they have available for.
Yeah, and I should note, yeah, thank you, John. And John knows more of the details, but what I heard was that some of their units have, and like they're 2-bedroom with an option of a third, or you could do it as an ADU. So if someone wanted to add a unit in that way, they could do that as well. So there's seems like a nicely innovative project that is responding to the preliminary reviews we had with them a couple of years ago. Lisa?
I can't remember if these are all for sale or if there's going to be some rentals or how that breaks down.
If the 12 units would be deed restricted, the affordable units, and then the rest of them would be for sale at market rate.
Thanks.
Right, and they're all for sale. The affordable ones are as well. They're just, yeah, that deed restricted. Sarah?
I'm just checking in. How many stories? You say elevator, and I'm thinking already 3rd story, but.
It would be 3 stories, yeah.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. Thanks.
Yep.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Any other items or questions related to planning reports?
I do have a couple other things going on to update. One is that Dante, our public works superintendent, is working on a couple of different items. One is the EV fast charge at the city parking lot at Burnett Street and Main Street. That did go to council, and I was not able to stay for that, so I'll ask Sarah or Diana to provide some input on that. But he is still working on that with EVgo, which I believe is one of the more preferred providers by the energy group. And for now, he's been looping in Steve Pierce as representative. And hopefully, Steve, you can we'll be tracking that and pulling in the energy group as needed. It's a little easier for staff if we can have one point person in one of the working groups and go from there. And then he is also working on a contract. I believe this also went to the full energy group, I believe, for solar panels on the library building. And so that is something that if there are any, I know I don't know how the energy group wants to coordinate with staff on that. I know Kenna and Joshua and I had talked about having an agenda item, not today, but at one of our next meetings, about how to coordinate with other city staff and know which projects should be coming here for some review or vetting and how that works, whether it's a working group or the full committee or what that is. But I just wanted to update on those. And then we do have a tentative date for our housing element review with Planning Commission on December 13th. That is tentative. We're trying to wrap up, and I actually do need to hop off, and I'll hand it over to Phoebe and John to do a call with one of our consultants on that to wrap up some stuff. We are supposed to get our letter and hopefully, fingers crossed, pre-certification letter with just minor edits needed from HCD. Regardless, the deadline for that letter is December 1st. They will have taken the full 90 days to do the letter. They were granted an additional 30 days from the state, whereas the city's deadlines all remain the same. So it's a bit of a pinch for us, but we are trying to work through and have upcoming hearings on that. And I think that's all I have. Oh, we do have the Climate Action Committee's next update to council, both info update and hopefully work plan discussion scheduled for December 20th. Councilmember Ridge?
Yeah, so just as a general comment on this discussion regarding the EV units on at Burnett, after substantial discussion late in the evening, the general conclusion was that there was a need for Climate Action Committee input on that project in order to assist in fully developing the details. The City Council in general felt that there just wasn't enough detail about the various groups involved and the limitations that might be inherent in the contract that the city was being asked to sign. So it was pretty much bumped back to Climate Action Committee with the understanding that the delay might mean that the city wouldn't necessarily get the PG&E grant, but that it was worth taking that risk to make sure that we did the right thing. So Climate Action Committee, hooray, basically.
Right. Well, and hopefully we don't lose the funding for it. I think that's kind of one of the things that city staff is sort of butts up against sometimes is, so I do know that they need to work with a PG&E approved vendor. The EVgo is approved by PG&E, and so Dante did have a preliminary meeting with them a day or so ago. It would, one of the, I don't know if you call it unintended consequences, but one of the things that happens when you upsize the electrical charge to higher capacity charger is that that will require some above ground transformers that will not be terribly sightly on the city parking lot site. And so, you got to have a place for electrical equipment, right? That's the fallout from it. He's trying to work on whether that could at least be within a little bit further away than right on the street so that it can be at least nestled within some trees or landscape buffers, so. And yes, I actually, Sunali, I did actually say, well, maybe we could locate it in a way where it's the signage for the city parking lot on the backside.
I did have a question procedurally. What I heard, Carrie, was you're saying that Steve Pierce had been looped in to work with Dante. My understanding from the city council was that the city council wanted a recommendation, an official recommendation from the Climate Action Committee. So what would be the process for making sure that that happened, or perhaps I misunderstood?
Sure. So the point would be for it to go to the energy working group, since those are the expert kind of folks on that that issue, and then come to the CAC. I don't know from Dante what the schedule is for the, you know, he's had a preliminary meeting, but it is, yeah, it would. I think once it's worked through and we have a proposal, it would then come to the CAC for review and formal recommendation.
Sounds about right. Okay, thanks again, everyone. Anything else on the planning department front? Questions, points? All right, let's look forward to anything from the city council report.
I wanted to just thank Steve and Lisa Pierce for being present in that discussion. It's always grateful to hear from our public and also to hear from people with such deep knowledge about the EV situation. So I appreciate your hanging in there, both of you, for that late night discussion and sounding so rational and helpful. I'm hoping, Diana, you'll comment on the SAVES appeal. I just wanted to mention one thing that I brought forward, and that was our application to our supervisor in the 5th district. We have $2 million for her to distribute. And our staff came up with a request for $60,000, which I thought was a little bit of share for this big municipality, the only one in the whole West District. So we worked through that. The recommendation to her that will go to her is based on Safe Routes to School report in the area surrounding Annalee High School to slow down the cars on Taft and Sunset and Johnson, if you know that loop around, and to put in a sidewalk at the end of the Annalee Field and a number of potential projects. And it is by design a divisible project. If we're asking for too much, the supervisor can take out a few things, but who would deny our youth a better roadway and sidewalk way and bicycle way? I hope she goes for it. So SAVES, Diana, what's our quick update? Thanks.
So a really quick update is that SAVE's ability to continue to use the property on Gravenstein Highway North for their RV village expires as of the end of December. SAVE's applied formally through for a permit that would allow them to remain using that property for an additional 2-year period. That permit was approved by the Planning Commission and then appealed to the City Council. That appeal happened at our last meeting. The City Council heard from the Planning Commission and read the very thorough staff report, thank you very much, from our planning director, and I'm sure John had a hand in that. And then also heard from the appellant, which was the some neighbors in that area, the Friends of Northwest Sebastopol is how they title themselves. The appeal was denied, and effectively what that allows is for the RV Village to continue, the permit to be in place, and allowing the RV Village to remain there for an additional 2 years. I'd note a piece of information is that the City Council did support a letter for funding from the owner of the property, St. Vincent de Paul, and they have indicated that they will be pursuing affordable housing on that site in 2024. So obviously there's an overlap there. And that permit, the affordable housing project, will still have to go through a formal process in our planning department in order to approve whatever their plans might be. But clearly this is, there is an end time to the RV Village. And I guess the other piece I would say, so it went well, and that permit is in place. The other comment I would make from a city council perspective, unrelated to the RV Village, is just to remind to everyone that at our next meeting, December 6th, the three city council people who have been in lead positions on our city council for literally a decade and more, Sarah Gurney for the most of all, will be having their last meeting on December 6th. And this, we will say goodbye to them and hello to the newly seated city council members who, in all likelihood, it hasn't been certified, in all likelihood will be Stephen Zollman and Sandy Maurer and Jill McLewis. And important to this group is that at that point, the city council currently scheduled in late December or early January will make a decision about appointments. And those appointments will be to, relevant to this group, to the Zero Waste Sonoma, JPA, and also to SCTA and RCPA. So SCTA, RCPA, the two city council members that you see at Climate Action Committee are those who hold the seats for SCTA, RCPA. That would, in this instance, be Sarah. And Zero Waste Sonoma, in this instance, would be me. What I just want everyone here to know is that the outcome of that discussion, voted on, supported by a majority of the 5 city council members, will determine who you will be seeing here at this Climate Action Committee meeting beginning probably in January. So don't worry, everyone will be wonderful for you, but I just want you to be aware of that. And I think maybe a few words, if you wouldn't mind, from Sarah would be great.
I just want to emphasize this. At the local level, the existing council will be certifying the election. It's just what was going on January 6th, but it's right here in our own town with our own election results. Isn't that fabulous? Right down to the ground, right down to our ground government.
Okay, but how about a goodbye speech, Sarah?
Everybody got my thank you text today. I'm hoping if you read it, I'll do my goodbye speech on December 6th. And actually, if I don't do it, I'll send it out by email.
Okay, well,
no speeches now. We have to get to this work plan, you guys.
But thank you for your service, Sarah.
Yes,
everyone?
You're welcome. Your way, yay.
Okay.
That's one of my things. And Sarah, we might have an opening for a citizen seat on this committee if you're feeling a little bored. All right. Thanks, everyone, for all of that. Many things to look forward to in the new year, to be sure. Moving on to our regularly scheduled agenda, our first and largest item would be the draft work plan review. I will hand it over to Phoebe shortly to facilitate that. I'm hoping that everybody had a chance to at least skim through it and particularly look at the action items or actions related to working groups in which you're participating. I think given Phoebe's short availability and time remaining with the city, we would need to focus today on anything that you read that you feel needs to be altered, really needs to be altered in a short period of time, not subtleties of wording, but is there anything in the draft as stated that you feel needs to actually change for it to be acceptable and effective moving forward? And with that said, I will happy to hand it off to Phoebe.
Thank you, Joshua. So yes, this is the sort of synthesis of our discussion at our last meeting on November 9th. It has been shared with city department heads for their feedback, and that was included in the staff report, which I just put in the chat as well. And so, as Joshua said, the goal today is to make sure that you all are happy with the work plan, and then I'll be writing up any edits tomorrow and writing the staff report so that it can go to council December 20th. So that's the sort of tentative schedule. It'll need to be approved by council. And the other next step is creating these implementation plans, which there was one example one at the bottom of the agenda packet, and those are based off of the project proposal template that Alex created, and that's on the committee webpage. So we can talk a little more about that later, but just wanted to give that context. And then I will share my screen. We can go through the work plan. Okay, is that big enough for everyone or should we get larger? So there's a couple categories in the work plan. The first section that are these numbered prioritized ones are the actions that were sort of agreed upon by the whole committee at the last meeting as being priorities. And then they're prioritized within this section by both the small group rankings that we had with the small discussion groups that we had, how those groups rank the items, and then as well as the dot prioritization activity that we did that was a more individual activity. So I looked at those two rankings, as well as actually the working group who had originally selected them to prioritize these. Down below, there are some CAC priorities that everyone put really highly, but they're not necessarily projects that this committee can, put a lot of time into. So like this one, everyone prioritized using this equity lens. That's more of a process action than a project that the committee is taking on. I also put here ongoing working group projects. So like the compost giveaways, the climate article, the upcycled art project. If there's anything that's missing here, please let me know. And then staff projects as well. So the website update that's going on that incorporates some of the actions that were in the framework as well. And below all of those are the other working group priorities that were actions that each working group picked out, but they weren't ones that came to the top in our last meeting. So there's a couple here, like these first two, they each got 1 dot in the dot prioritization activity, but none of the small groups, small discussion groups, placed them really highly. So that's why they're in this category. There were some that had the opposite sort of situation, like number 8 here, expanding social media efforts. It didn't get any dots, but 2 of the groups ranked it really highly. So that's sort of how I balanced out those. And so I wanted to go over this sort of general ordering with you and whether that feels like a good reflection of how this group would prioritize them. Also wanted to check in specifically on this number 7. I wasn't quite clear how we had left it with the group, whether it was only the lowering permit fees that were a priority or whether these other elements were included as well. And this was for this, well, there are 2 actions that both included lowering permit fees, and the lowering permit fees got 3 dots in the dot prioritization activity, but only one of the groups prioritized. So just wanted to bring that up and discuss whether that one really is a priority and where it would fit in this list. So any thoughts on the prioritization? Yes, Diana?
Yeah, I had a question for each of the working groups. If this is this a 1-year plan, Phoebe? Is that what this is about?
Yeah, this is for the next year, 2023 to 24.
So my question is, as the working groups look at, this seems like a lot of items to get done in a year. And I'm just wondering whether the working groups that might take responsibility for a particular item feel that this is actually workable within a year. And if not, how do we deal with that? Do we identify some as aspirational and some as we are going to get them done?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think they are sort of ordered in the order of what is, most likely to get done in the next year. So like this first one, the energy working group is already working on this electrification survey and the green buildings tour. And the education and outreach working group is already working on the climate engagement series. So, and The active transportation plan is something that's scheduled to happen. So those are projects that are sort of more likely to occur, whereas some of these ones at the bottom, like the stormwater management system, that's only going to happen if there's a funding source that comes up in the next year that's
Okay.
identified for it.
And then the related question would be whether you've identified whether it's worthwhile adding to this plan the specific working group that's responsible. You've identified them verbally, but would that be helpful? And that's all I got for now. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion. Sonali?
One phenomenal job at organizing all this information and tracking everything, including the 1 dots. So thank you very much. I don't know why I was under the impression that we were advising the city council on climate change. And I thought then the council would somehow find funding to be able to employ the actions that were being advised, but everybody's shaking their head.
Well,
or whether it be grants or whatever funding we were able to avail ourselves of.
yeah, that's a good question. So sort of the process of taking it to council is making sure that the Climate Action Committee's priorities are in line with the city council's priorities, so that the committee isn't doing work that the council doesn't want to have happen or doesn't think is the most important thing. The funding requests are going to need to be made separately. So that's one of the parts of the implementation plan that's down at the bottom, is identifying what are the funding needs to make it happen, and where might they come from. So grant funding is one of those. The city's in the process of looking for a grant writer and selecting an organization that would be able to look for grants for these projects and other projects. The other upcoming opportunity for funding is the mid-year budget review. And so Carrie, when she comes back, can speak more to what that process will look like. But there is also the opportunity to get it funded through the normal budgeting process, which would also have to go back to council for approval. So does that help clarify that, Sonali?
Thank you.
Yes, Joshua?
Yeah, a couple of things, Phoebe. First, just to sort of second the suggestion that most of these actions are sort of associated with specific working groups. And I think it would help us all to just clarify that and have the associated working group listed in there. I don't necessarily see the numbers there being a sequence of operations, given that different folks have different focuses. So to me, there's sort of this top list of the ones that we're going to try to get to first. And if we somehow get through all of those in the year ahead, then we look further down. But you know, those first 9, I think, are almost simultaneous rather than one after the other. So that's just one piece. For instance, on the stormwater plan thing, the number 9 there, that's something that I'm fully capable of initiating with Dina and Dante. That is not dependent on funding. Not that we are taking the place of professionals or consultants, but we're in a place to do some analysis and some concept planning and just cover that. So just to clarify that happening doesn't actually depend on getting more funding. It being made some official city document at a future time is another stage, but we're suggesting to merely do some analysis and some concepts and that we can start at any time. Finally, could we? Sure.
Sorry, just to jump in on that one. So thank you for clarifying what you were thinking about that. I think the reason it was put on here as depends on funding is that the city does need to update its official stormwater management plan. And that's something that engineering is estimating at $200K. So getting that done is going to require a big source of funding from somewhere.
Absolutely. Whatever we produce would just be one ingredient to fold into that process. So again, we would just
Got
be
it.
sort of adding in a layer of consideration. Okay. Finally, could we talk a little bit about it was framed as a staff request that working groups formalize the project proposals as a sort of a within a specific format. I know you gave an example at the end, but just to frame that a bit, is that staff meaning planning department? And is there a deadline or a requirement on that? Or is that more like it helps all of us if we put our heads together and figure out exactly what is entailed to do each of these actions, and that just sort of helps everybody plan? Can you just speak a bit to the context of that?
Yeah, let's actually hold that question for the end. I definitely want to come back to those implementation plans, but want to see if there's any other comments on the work plan part before we get to that. Sonali?
I know in Jerry's city, we had talked about this, the council, or in the framework, there was a suggestion for how city decisions would be made, like viewing it through a climate lens. Is that aspect still something that the council has adopted? Because I did read this. Is it in here?
So this one is about viewing climate action through an equity lens. There's also this one down here, aligning permit approvals with framework goals, which is sort of a part of that, and making sure that planning department decisions are sort of consistent with the framework.
I did see that. I think of okay, the city's hosting an event. Is there some framework to look through? Are we meeting? Are we engaging this event through a climate lens? What are what's the protocol, or any decision that the city's making? It was just my understanding that that was a part of our framework.
Yeah, good question. I'm not sure that that's sort of explicitly in the framework. I think by, adopting the framework, the city is stating those priorities. But I don't know that there is a sort of specific policy that was adopted as part of that. Diana?
Yeah, on the zero waste side, because of SB 1383, the city is adopting many ordinances, policies that implement zero waste principles. I'm not sure from a perspective of all city decisions whether there's an effective way to simply require that all city policy be seen through a climate change lens. I don't see that anywhere in this work plan, and I'm not sure, Carrie, that there would be really a way to do that. But I will say that there's state rules that are forcing the city to implement various requirements.
Right, and on that, I would think there certainly are, is it every single decision down to buying paper clips or printing that document versus not printing that document? There's probably a nuance we don't need to go to, but the city has, certainly on the waste and the events, we have a zero waste policy. We don't bring bottled water to meetings. We, have a crafts or whatnot if needed. We have the polystyrene and the single-use bag, and a lot of the zero waste stuff are implemented into ordinances. They're a little bit easier to do into ordinances. The building department, certainly through their green building code implementation, the engineering department, as they're looking at infrastructure, and our local hazard mitigation plan, we're looking at green infrastructure solutions rather than let's just build a dam around the city to stop the flood. It's more, what can we do to restore the laguna and make sure that as we're doing, the Calder Creek naturalization is about taking the concrete out of the creek and making it a natural allowed to flood, but in a way that's controlled and natural kind of a way. So I think, I would say in most city decisions that I'm aware of that we are implementing that at a staff level. I think it's kind of in the ethos. Certainly even when the fire department wants to buy a fire truck and they come to council, the question is, can we get electric? Or, sorry, Councilmember Gurney, can't hear you.
I was just saying dump trucks too.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry. Thank you. So, there are certainly obstacles to some of those just in terms of availability, but yeah, so I think council is also asking those questions on quite a number of things, whether it becomes a, particular section of our council reports that isn't up to me, that would be up to council, similar to we have council goals. When it is related to environmental action, I've been putting in the climate action framework goals and policies and consistency with those as well. So a lot of the physical development ends up being with that. That would, and obviously there are some that aren't necessarily related.
Folks, I'm sorry to interject here, but we're diverging farther and farther from the topic of the work plan that we really need to get done in this meeting. And so I totally appreciate this subject, and I'm wondering if in general terms, the city council having adopted the framework, but has the framework been shown to the other departments such as the planning commission, et cetera. So there may be a further process to take the framework goals and be sure that we filter that further through the city. That's not what we're doing at today's meeting. If we need to take it up again next month or the month after that, let's definitely do that. If anybody has, burning comments on this subject, that would be great, but I want to bring it back around to the work plan details draft, if we can, please. Thank you. Lisa, didn't mean to cut you off there by all means.
All right. Great job, Phoebe. Really, just all these things you somehow managed to pull together. So on page 2, that highlighted little spot there, considering lowering permit fees for installing electric options. I'm not sure why that would be highlighted and not just as a regular item. It seems to me like it belongs where it is, and it's also backed up by, on page 12, the city operations. See where it says that. About the permit. It says CO1.4. And do you see it?
So the reason it's highlighted there is because I wanted to ask the group about it specifically and make sure that we'll ask whether that specific piece is the priority, or if you also want to include the 2 bullet points above that. Because in the last meeting, they were 2 separate sort of actions that both had lowering permit fees.
I think as far as my vote for that goes, that they should all stay in there. And yeah, it kind of really depends on it's not a lot of money we're talking about, but it's still some money. So, that's always a little out of our hands in some ways, but so it's that other one is on page 12, CO1 for considering lowering permit fees. So it's kind of backed up there too, but I think it's a good spot for it.
Yeah, let me just jump in on that. Basically, Phoebe, those are all techniques to achieve the goal there. There may be other ones that also exist. So it's not do this or do that or whatever. Do the things that incentivize people in order to convert to electric from gas. And that's one of them that many cities have taken on. They've done some of the other ones as well.
Thank you, Lisa and Jerry, for clarifying on that. Does anyone else have a thought about that item number 7 in the work plan? Joshua.
Yeah, I would just echo the sentiments coming from the working group that lowering permit fees by itself is not necessarily enough to complete the picture. We've heard from a few different sources that there's a shortage of qualified contractors. And so finding some way to encourage that bit of a logjam to open up in whatever way we can still seems very pertinent.
Okay, great. So I will remove the highlighting and leave all of that as it is. Another question I had for the group was on some of the items that did not make it into the top 9 items that are in the work plan. One of those, let me share my screen again. One of those is T 3.2, exploring micromobility options. This was not in the top priorities for the entire committee, but I believe it is something that the transportation working group has already been working on. And Alex, I believe, was working on a proposal for that. So the question for the group is whether that's a work item that the committee wants to continue or not. And I don't know, Alex, if you want to add anything about what you've done on that project already.
Oh, that's it for now.
Yes, Jerry.
Yeah, I don't know why that wouldn't be, I know I wasn't in the last meeting because I was out of town, but I don't know why that wouldn't be included. One of the things about that, Alex and the team so far have been investigating, what firms are there, how do they do this, what would be constraints in the city. Also, you'll find for every city which has this, I was in Amsterdam, Paris, Rome, they're a little bit bigger than Sebastopol. In every case, there's ordinances required that need to be investigated. So it's a larger part, even if we don't provide it as a city function. In most cases, it's not provided as a city function. It's done by private enterprise. You have to make allowances within the city and set what are the requirements. So following through on that, since we see this showing up in many places, including Santa Rosa now, it would seem to be one of the things that we should have there. Otherwise, we'll be caught flat-footed because they're likely to show up.
Joshua.
Yeah, if I recall on that discussion, there was sort of a two-pronged place where we left it. One was let's wait and see how it goes in other cities, and two was let's see if the same company will do us a proposal that's a little more leaning towards e-bikes rather than scooters, as their first proposal was. I'm not sure if the company has been responsive. So that's my memory of where it was left. My main point, though, is that I wouldn't want to speak for the transportation working group, which includes Woody, who we know is leaving the committee in a bit. So I don't know if we're in a position to bump that up in the priorities without having point people who are interested in pursuing it. To my mind, it's okay. Like all these back burner things are fine. If we're stuck on things that are on the front burner and we need to look for something else to do, we have this secondary list of things that we could advance. But I wouldn't want to shove it forward without people backing it who are going to be in the group. Thanks.
Yeah, Alex?
Yeah, I would just clarifying, this is on T 3.2, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think, ideally we're trying to get the one bike shop that's in the city to work on it, but I know that there hasn't been a lot of interest from them or a lot of interest from the community when they did rent electric bikes. So I think that the challenge is finding a company that wants to do this micromobility rental piece and it can be economically feasible. I believe that Bird made some announcements, who was the company that initially did a proposal or shared some information. They've kind of pulled out of a lot of small cities because it hasn't been as economically feasible for them. They do, however, have scooters in other areas, but I haven't seen any e-bikes. I don't believe the e-bikes are part of that program. So I think there might be some, the ROI might not be as high with the bike, given it just might be a bigger upfront cost. So it needs a lot of usage, and unless it could be maybe Sonoma County specific, like where you could ride the bike between Sebastopol, Santa Rosa, Santa Rosa, Windsor, something on a lot more open areas to get from those places. I don't necessarily know how feasible that is. So it might need to be a county level discussion, and I don't know if there's a whole lot we can do on e-bikes if the bike shop itself doesn't want to work. But I think there might be some other options. We'll keep our ears out, but I don't necessarily see this as a huge priority to push for next year.
Okay,
Given
so
that there's not a lot of options.
So Alex, what I'm hearing is that you're okay with leaving it where it is in the work plan right now. Does that sound right? Zeno, did you want to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, the transportation group hasn't been talking about this for a while because my understanding was that we're waiting for the city to work with Bird to try to see what they can do right now. So I would be thinking that the work group would talk about this before further action was taken on it, because we haven't really analyzed the situation, given the absence of what the city has been doing with Bird.
Okay. So it sounds like it's staying where it is for now, and the working group will pick it up as they have time or as opportunities come up. Diana?
Yeah, I just want to clarify that I am not aware of the city of Sebastopol doing any work directly with Bird. Someone else can clarify that for me. I understood that Santa Rosa, that there were other jurisdictions that we were watching to see how it worked out with Bird. But maybe a staff member or someone could clarify that for me. I don't think the city is actively pursuing a conversation with Bird.
Yeah, I think you're right there, Dana.
Yeah,
I don't
sorry.
think. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, sorry for the confusion there. Yeah, it's Bird doesn't really have interest in doing bikes. I think in Sebastopol is what it ultimately comes down to. We've followed up with them multiple times and haven't really got much back. So there's nothing that the city needs to do or anything like that. We're basically at a point where we're kind of in a stalemate. And like I said, because it's not as economically feasible for these smaller cities, I think that's why they're not really putting a lot of effort in. So I'd be surprised if we see much on this from them or any of the other companies next year, but you never know. I think we're good, Phoebe.
Okay, yeah, thank you for clarifying on that, Alex. So the other item that I wanted to discuss that was not prioritized by the whole committee was this one on tracking progress and tracking the metrics that were included in the framework document. And that's obviously not one of the ones that made it into the top list, but it's something that I think is really important for the city to be tracking, some sort of set of metrics. So wanted to discuss that with the group. And I think at some point, Jerry and Steve had been mentioned as individuals who might be interested in doing that kind of tracking work. So, that's a question for them, whether they'd be interested in taking that on and whether it's something worth that the group feels is worth moving up and pursuing. So, Jerry.
Well, you weren't around for the very first meeting, but in the very first meeting, I said the first thing we should be doing is measuring. And the tracking for any of the other tasks, that's the fundamental thing that has to be done, because you don't know if any of the others actually result in achieving anything. So measuring is the first thing. And if you read any literature from any other city, the very first thing that they have in the work plan is develop the set of metrics that you have and find a way of measuring them on a regular basis. We do that for other things in the city. And here we have a specific target. And I think that's actually, I would have put that as number one if I was in the room over everything else.
Okay, thank you, Jerry. I had a feeling that's what you were going to say. So Jerry and Steve, I sent you earlier the document I had been working on that has all the metrics in the framework in it and identifies how they could be tracked. Does that seem like a task that you would be willing and able to take on?
I haven't had a chance to look at it yet, Phoebe.
Okay, no worries. But in general, is tracking metrics something that you would be interested in working on with the
Yeah,
understanding?
I'd like to work on it. I don't know what Steve thinks on it, but part of it is tracking is something which is a city function, and many things the city will actually have the records already. Putting the report together once a year might be something the committee does, but certainly the first thing the committee should be doing is determining what should be tracked, and that should be in the work plan, a target to sit down as a committee and say, these are the things that should be tracked.
All right, Zaina?
Yeah, I want to kind of support this. I think it's very essential with the emergency resolution that the city adopted, talks about 2030 as a carbon neutral target, not just for city operations, but for the city. And so I would think that this provides a framing for this plan for next year, that there needs to be something when we present this in the city council, there needs to be something about how this contributes to us getting to that target, right? So there needs to be a somewhat more of an assessment of these proposals as to how effective they are to reduce emissions.
Thank you, Zaina. Lisa?
Yeah, I think on one hand, I agree with what Jerry said about the importance of measuring, but I also can imagine that this is very time consuming and requires a certain understanding of a lot of these things we really won't know for sure. For instance, if just take a simple one like reducing the permit fees for electrification projects. We won't really know if it's the permit fees that were helping that acceleration or if there was other things. Things get very complicated very quickly, I think. And I am concerned with staff time. It's going to be an expensive process unless it's done by volunteers to actually do all these measurements. So I'm not sure who's going to pay for it and who will do it. And those are my concerns. Thank you.
Yeah, I think what it would sort of look like, considering, realistically staff time, and the first step, as Jerry said, is determine what the set of metrics are. So there's already some metrics in the framework, and I've been going through those, and some of them are just ones that you couldn't possibly measure, like how many trees are planted in the city. You're not gonna be able to count that. So going through those and figuring out which ones are useful and which ones are actually trackable. And then that document also identifies who's tracking them. So some of them are already tracked. They're in the level of service report that the planning department puts together. And that's like number of solar installations are in there. And there's other sort of permit data that can be tracked to get a lot of those metrics. And then it would be most likely, up to the CAC to gather those metrics that are most relevant for the climate metrics and put them together into some kind of report. So that's sort of what I see as the process for that. That helps clarify. Joshua?
Yeah, two things. First, let me say that from a facilitation standpoint, again, we're zooming into the details on one thing and that we really kind of need to stay general with respect to the work plan. That being said, I personally think it's a little unfair to say that a couple of volunteers who are not going to actually be officially on the committee as of next year are supposed to gather, analyze, and report data, because that's essentially a professional function that would be city staff, that would be a paid consultant, that sort of thing. As I see it, the role of the committee is to do research and make recommendations. And so this process of suggesting the kind of metrics that should be tracked and making a proposal to the city for how that, some plan or some feasibility about how it might be possible to track the metrics, that I think sort of falls within the committee wheelhouse. But to say that committee volunteers are actually supposed to track and analyze and report on all this data seems like a little bit too much of an ask given our scope, frankly.
Yeah, thank you for that comment, Joshua. And just to clarify that the committee members would not actually be, like tracking the data themselves. That would be the city departments, but it would be the collection. And Carrie, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think Joshua's suggestion makes a lot of sense, and not to get into the detail of what that would look like now, but I think, yeah, what are the metrics you're looking for? Are they actually something that is easily trackable? Staff doesn't have a lot of time to go through and, sort through how many EV, gathering whatever types of information. We've had a lot of help from this committee in the last couple of years. And RCPA also tracks like the greenhouse gas inventories periodically for us to report them to council and track them on an annual basis. We already have a system for that, in that we already do, and the planning department already manages and does a annual report to council once a year. That includes a lot of statistics, including things like, new kilowatts of PV that the city has issued permits for and that kind of stuff. So some of the things, if they're easy to track, unlike Phoebe's example of how many trees were planted, if there are metrics that can be compiled and done, I think getting to that list, as Joshua says, and then working through what that list is probably the right way to go about doing it, and then figuring out, is it doable by city staff, or would there be so many hours it's going to be another staff person.
Okay, so considering that the task is sort of evaluating what metrics might be useful, is that something that the committee wants to prioritize in this work plan? Joshua.
Speaking just as a committee member, I want to acknowledge that several folks have indicated that yes, tracking metrics is important. And so my personal view would be that bumping it up out of the back burner stuff and tacking it on to the list of the things that we should be doing on an ongoing basis would be reasonable.
Lisa?
So Steve just let me know that his audio is really bad where he is right now, but he would be interested in working with this aspect.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. So, yeah, Diana?
I know it's been discussed here, but which working group would be responsible for this item?
So this item came from the city operations section. So the funding and finance working group was the one that went through that section and selected this action. I'm not sure that, they would necessarily be responsible for it. And Steve is in that working group and expressed interest, but.
Okay, yeah, my reason for asking is just to make sure that whoever might be responsible for it, who's present at this meeting, is in agreement and in support of doing that work.
Jerry?
Let me just answer from my point of view, Diana's question. It would be all of the working groups, and each of the working groups would identify the measurables, the metrics that they think are important in their specific area, and then might also identify how could we actually measure those things. And that would then be brought to the entire committee, and the committee would put together the entire set. But I would expect it not to be one group. That is, the energy group would bring some energy metrics. The transportation group would bring some transportation metrics. The sequestration group would say, oh, this part for sequestration. These are the things that we think should be measured. That's the way I would go at it.
All right, so it's sounding like there's some consensus here about moving this item up and having it be something that the committee considers and as part of its work plan. So are there any other comments on the work plan before we move on to talking about the implementation plans? Yes, Debbie.
I just have a question. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone who made it to the last meeting, and I couldn't be there. And Phoebe, I don't know how you took everything and put it in this format, but thank you guys all so much. I appreciate it greatly. I did notice something. I don't see the work plan up anymore, so I can't remember, but I think it was on your first priority. So if you can at least if you could answer that first, which was the social media. They'd like the climate action to have more social media impact or content, or is that correct? Was that on the first level tier?
Yeah, that's number 8.
I actually have it open on my computer too, so I didn't need you to. Yeah, thank you. So since I've been I wasn't at the meeting and I've been the one who's mostly doing this, I'm wondering, would this question be better for when we get to implementation? I would just like to hear more of what people, what the outcome of this was. Like, how do they see it? What are their questions? What are their concerns? You know, where would they like to see this presence?
I'm sorry if I might interject just a little bit. We're running out of time in our overall meeting. Essentially, what we're here today to do is just to approve the work plan as it stands. We keep zooming into details on particular projects on the work plan, but we're not really supposed to be expanding those. As long as they're part of the work plan, we can get to them later, if that's okay with you all.
No, I absolutely appreciate it. Thank you so much. I guess my question is, if it's a priority, you know what, it can wait until we approve the work plan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah.
And with that said, again, sorry to step in, you all, but it's kind of part of my job to just keep us rolling. There was an outstanding piece, a subject with respect to clarifying the process about taking these items and putting them into a proposal for a staff report sort of format that Phoebe had asked that we push off to the end. If we could spend a few minutes covering that, maybe. And then certainly if anybody else has burning issues about the work plan that they want to bring forward, that's the time for it. But we do have a couple of other items to discuss at the end of this meeting. So I'm hoping to wrap this in a bit.
Yeah, so the intention with the proposal, the project proposal template, which Alex created, is to sort of expand on each of the items and get into the details that we've been somewhat discussing in this meeting. So identifying sort of the general plan goals. Some of this is already in the work plan, but just expanding on it to identify what the steps of the project would be, what the funding needs would be. And then those implementation plans will help the working groups and staff to move forward on each of those items, and also help in the budgeting process. And Carrie, since you're back now, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about what that budgeting process is going to look like.
Sure. So yeah, and I can just the step that this piece is really where each of you tried to start to go in terms of detailing out the scope and what it all involved and how you do it. That's you know, the sheet that the worksheet that Alex had put together is what we would envision utilizing for that. In terms of the budgeting, yeah, what does so what do each of these projects mean in terms of you know, staff time, because we can equate that to dollars. If it's, you know, hiring someone like Phoebe, not that we'll ever find someone like Phoebe, but is it a consultant? Like the electrification survey, that costs $2,000 basically to do, and so that's basically our budget, you know, for communications with Holly for the Climate Action Committee is now expended. So are there things like that for the future projects? I need to know that, and once this goes to council in December, and council will be able to say, hey, no, we want this to be a priority, move this up or down. We'll be asking you to put those into some form. You don't need to know the exact dollar, but what is it that you're, flesh out the scope a little bit of what the project is. And that'll help me try to understand and request budget from council so that it can get into our next budget cycle. I believe my department budget is usually due in February. So it gives us a couple months after council has signed off for that work to happen. That's the next steps.
Thank you, Carrie. Jerry?
Yeah, Phoebe, thanks for that, because I was going to suggest that much earlier in the meeting. I wanted to know why we wouldn't use the form that Alex had. Now, I modified that form a little bit because there was some confusion in using it. There's a place where we make a statement from either the task group or from the committee. Then I put sections in it which were specifically for staff. So staff could say, our opinion is this, our add to this is this, we think the budget is that, our position would be. And that extension is, you will have seen it in the last version of the recommendation we sent the council last time on the REACH code. And I suggest we use that format. I'm glad that you said that, because I think that's the best way to do this. And then it comes to the committee after that. So everybody looks at it and says, yeah, that's precisely it. I wanted to also explain something else for Diana. You asked the question about, is this the work plan for this year? Oh, we can't accomplish all those things this year. It's the work plan for this year. We won't accomplish all of those things this year. Many things take several years. One of the ones that we have in the energy group says, let's put a demonstration microgrid together. Okay, there's regulations that need to be changed. There's coordination with PG&E. There's Sonoma Clean Power. And we've been talking to all of them so far. And we recognize it's a multi-year project. So we actually call that a long-term project. Others would say we finish this year, but they are part of the work plan because you have to work on it. You can't wait till the year that's supposed to be accomplished to finally do it, because it can take more than 1 year. Anyway, Phoebe, I like this idea of that submission. I think that's a great buy.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jerry. So that's sort of the ask for the working groups, and I appreciate the suggestion to identify which working group is identified with each action. So I'll do that, and then the ask for the working groups is that you'd start sort of sketching out this project proposal for each of the items that is your group would be involved in, and then work with staff to sort of finalize that. So any other questions on the work plan, implementation plan, before we move on? Yes, Debbie.
I just have one quick question, which is if there's something that is assigned to your working group, I think you just answered this, Phoebe, but instead of getting more elaboration, we take it ourselves and sketch it out and bring it back for approval. Is that correct?
So
things are very vague in what the asks are. So we would take it and then we would go ahead and flush out how we would take that action and bring it to fruition, bring it to the staff, and they would approve it. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, it
would be to bring it back to this committee for review. Or, as a working group report that way.
That answers my last question about our group, which was taking on, we will go ahead and, okay, thank you. That was it.
Yeah, and the actions that would be assigned to you are the actions that your working group selected as your priorities. So they're not just random actions. They're ones that, hopefully your whole working group was interested in. All right, well, thank you all for your input. And I think we need to move on to the next item.
Great. Thanks so much, Phoebe, for everything. Really greatly appreciate it. Okay, folks, our next item on the agenda, the official agenda, is working group reports. Unless there are burning working group reports that we have to address at this meeting as opposed to 2 weeks from now, I would like to push that back a little bit. On the chair reports front, there's sort of a few things that we should check in about, mostly related to this end of year scheduling, transitioning sort of process that we've heard. We do have, so again, next city council meeting on the 6th, there will be a rotation of the majority of the city council. And then we have our next meeting on December 14th, where we'll have a little chance to consolidate and review any open items. Then on the 20th is when we are sort of scheduled, by we, I mean specifically Kenna on Point, just to be specific, and any of the rest of us who can make it, are sort of introducing ourselves to the new council makeup and also presenting the work plan in its general form. The hope then would be that they say, yes, this work plan sounds like a good idea. And then the following month, we move into let's flesh out those work plan items so that we can get that into the budgeting process by the end of January or so. So those things are happening. There's also a bit of a rotation going on within our committee itself. So we have a few folks leaving. If I might pause for just a moment to clarify with Carrie what the timeline is on that, when the committee applications are supposed to be in, when interviews and new appointments are expected to happen.
Thank you, Josh. I was hoping you would ask about that. So far we've received 2 applications, and kudos for Woody. We did get one application that was his recruitment, trying to find a replacement for himself, I think, from looking at the application. But we do have more vacancies. So the official deadline was November 28th, so it was Monday. We're extending it by 2 weeks. I think that's through December 12th. We are still looking specifically for, I mean, there's a few vacancies for just general climate interest and, climate action interests. But we also have an opening, one of the youth openings, as well as the business owner representative. And Debbie, I'm going to bug you on the business owner rep and say, you got to go find a business owner rep to replace you so you can become the planning commission liaison. But yeah, so go bug some of your fellow business owners. There is a link for the application on the committee page. I will post it here right now since I'm already on that page. So council will likely they won't do the interviews until they have like the full group and the extension process is done. So that will likely be sometime in January at this point. And so one question I do have for those of you who are your term is ending at the end of the year, and that is if you could get to me, if you're willing to continue until such time as new folks are appointed. So that would probably be end of January. So probably be through the month of January, if you're willing to extend your term or not. That way, we know who's officially on the committee or not through that sort of period of December 31st, and when the council can get to interviews and new appointees.
Great, thank you, Carrie. So if I understand you correctly, we would anticipate new members joining us more like February than January. Is that reasonably correct?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Yep.
Okay, and just in transparency, I neglected to get my own reapplication in before the holiday, but I will do that.
All right. The good news is, yes, it has been extended. So yeah, and if anyone needs their old application, just let us know. We have those on file and we can send those to you so you can, update that through PDF, even if it's just strikeouts and whatever.
Great, thank you. I want to honor the hands that I saw in roughly the order I saw them. Alex, then Kenna, then Diana.
Hey, just quick note here. Do we all have to, if we started on the original committee, do we have to reapply, or is it just based on the term we set? That was my first question for my actual question, to make sure I'm not missing something.
It is based on, if I let you know that your term was up this year, you would need to reapply. Alex, I don't think your term was up this year, so you would not, but I can check that real quick.
And then I just have a quick update on a working group committee for the education piece on the climate engagement series. A couple things I may need your support with, Carrie. It looks like Phoebe discussed with you this morning to checking on the room for the community center. And then Also, question, we're thinking about doing like pizza or some sort of like, you know, light drinks or something. So we're probably, I don't know, I'm guessing we're probably gonna need $100 or something for budget. How do we make a budget request? Is that possible? Also, another question is, could I ask for sponsorship from like Acre or another pizza company in the area? Is that legal?
The second question is a good question. I don't know. I haven't had this come up from committees before because we don't have sort of the same kind of activity that you guys have, other than the Public Art Committee has, you know, their openings for art exhibits and things. I would say, yeah, there should definitely be some sort of budget request. I don't have an official form, but it would just be an email to me at this point, I guess. And if you could let me know, Alex, like, is this going to be in every single time you guys have a meeting? In which case I probably don't have budget for that because we don't normally, if it's a special event kind of a thing, you know, an opening kickoff kind of a thing, that I do have a budget for meetings that covers all of my committees and all of my department meetings that I have to have for the year. And it's only, I mean, I keep it pretty slim. I think it's like $1,000 or something, but I can certainly look at that.
Yeah,
and I can ask about the sponsorship because that I don't know, but I'm pretty sure we probably have, you know, I would imagine, yeah, Diana's, you're nodding your head. I would imagine that that's okay from a local business.
Hey, you two, is it possible we could finish the tactical details in correspondence thereafter? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Kenna?
I just had something really quick regarding the extensions. My hope and understanding is that the youth seats are open until filled, correct? Like they don't require ongoing extensions. And then I wanted to make a plea to the members here in recruiting young people. The high school students are really overwhelmed these days. So if you know any recent high school graduates who are, you know, going to the JC, still living at home in Sebastopol or West County, those might be good people to target as well, just to make sure we're not only thinking about high school students. Thank you.
Great. Diana?
Carrie, do you have in front of you the list of people whose terms are expiring? We can do this by email, but if you happen to know and could just reel them off, that would be good.
I will try to post them in the chat in the next 5 minutes.
Okay, and then youth member, I have someone in mind, so I will have worked on that person and I'll continue to. I do not believe that the youth membership is just open-ended, but maybe Carrie, you can clarify that and let all of us know. And then in terms of sponsorships, yeah, I'm sure donations are fine. And that's all I got, and thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Dina?
Oh, I just wanted to quickly say that Sonali made arrangements with People's Music on Main Street to use their front window temporarily for an art exhibit display. So some of the pieces from the art project are going to be in People's Music window up until December 19th. So take a look. It especially looks good at night because the lights are on the pieces and it's glimmery. During the day, you get a lot of window glare and a few things fell down, but otherwise take a look, please.
Thank you. All right, Diana, was your hand up for another thing or is it just lingering? Okay. Thanks. All right, everyone. We will shortly be going to input on next meeting agenda on just further notes about our sort of end of year scheduling here. Our next regularly scheduled meeting would be Wednesday, the 14th of December, which is 2 weeks from now. The meeting thereafter on the 28th, falling squarely in between Christmas and New Year's, is a time when a lot of people are traveling. So I'm not going to confirm canceling that meeting at this time, but I'm going to tell you in advance that we are hoping that we can cancel that meeting because frankly, both of your facilitators will be traveling during that time, and it might be tricky to assemble a quorum given the holiday logistics. So we're kind of hoping that we can all get whatever end of year kind of closure business ducks in a row done at the next meeting 2 weeks from today, and then have a break until January. That again, we're looking at January moving forward with the current membership, refining those work plan items into more specific plans and scopes, and then having a little bit of a refresh of the membership coming around February or so. My understanding is that fewer than half of the folks are likely to be changing, so chances are it will not be that big a change, but we'll probably have an introductory session or two, welcome the new folks, reevaluate our purpose, get everyone in working groups, et cetera, et cetera. That being said, I don't know, Kenna, if you have any other thoughts from the chair front, or if anybody else has lingering business from today's subjects that has not quite come forward. If that's a no, then at this time, I'm interested in any suggestions for things that we should perhaps discuss on the next agenda, which could easily include any of the subjects that people started talking about that I sort of like shrunk down a little bit so we could finish the work plan. So please feel free if anything comes to mind that you think it would be good to talk about on December 14th. Sing out now, if you please. Nothing? I mean, we'll make some stuff up if we have to. But,
well, there's stuff on there. I'll tell you what we already have, which is starting to discuss budget priorities, funding needs for the upcoming year, and then how to do process between CAC and departments in the city, and making sure that our communication flows are respectful and helpful to everyone on both sides. And then covering any additional items that we want in the council presentation.
Great. Dina.
Just time for Alex to talk again about the community engagement series, since it's starting in January. Maybe there's some things that the rest of us can do to support that effort, or at least be aware of what's going on to share it.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, well, I'll actually, yeah, I'm gonna set some time up for the agenda next time.
Excellent. Anything else from anyone else on this time? Okay, I will leave you with one final action item, which is just to be sure that you considered the issues that are upcoming here with respect to the turnover. Get any agenda items to us by, you know, a little less than a week from today, so that we can get them in the agenda for the following week. I would say if you have any further thoughts for Phoebe, you could send them to her, but I think she's done as of tomorrow. So really, unless you have a burning crystal realization that would be exceedingly helpful to her, we have done what we have with the work plan, and I trust that we have plenty of tools and ingredients for moving forward at this point. Thanks again, everyone, for being here.
Hold on.
Yes.
Sorry, before we go, did you all take a motion and vote on recommending the work plan to the council?
Oh, I guess we
All right,
should
so let's take public comment
that.
real quick and do that if you could facilitate that.
Okay. Any public comments or questions or concerns on the subject of the work plan or items discussed in this meeting today? All right, I make a motion that we take the draft work plan with the revisions, modest revisions that we have discussed with Phoebe so far today, for submission to City Council, presumably in December. And that represents our intents for our work for the following year.
I'm a second.
Second, thank you very much. So in shortly, I will ask for a show of electronic hands. Again, what we're saying is this work plan as a draft, as a working document, is good enough to move forward. All those in support of that principle, please raise your electronic hand. Or wave your real hand.
I think we
around
got
as
a
you
we got a
like.
real hand too there.
Great. It looks unanimous to me. I see 9 or 10 hands. Great. Thanks
Yep.
very much for
Thank you.
that. a brief moment, if people could take down their hands in assent. Is there anyone who wishes to vote, to vote against that? I don't know that there's anybody left who's officially a member. Any
That was all the voting members.
nays? Any abstentions? Oh, great. Universal approval, always a good place to start fresh. Thanks, everybody, for all your patience with this process. It's great to get to such a point. Happy holidays. See you in a couple of weeks.
Bye,
Thanks for-
Phoebe.
Thank you.
Bye, Phoebe.
Back, Joshua.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
The recording has stopped.
Joshua, I don't know if you heard that. Thanks for keeping us on track.
Oh,
Yeah.
thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Josh.
Appreciate it.
That took some wrangling.
Yeah.
Well, there's always too much to talk about.
Phoebe,